In the demonic cult, being born with royal blood should have made Cheon Yeo-Woon powerful. But for him, it became a death sentence. His mother was only a concubine. He had no clan protecting him, no martial arts training, no allies. And before he could even enter the demonic academy, assassins were already sent to erase him. But the people who wanted him dead made one mistake. They thought Cheon Yeo-Woon was just a weak prince. They had no idea that someone from the future was about to appear before him. And inside his dying body, a machine would awaken. A machine that could heal him, analyze martial arts, rebuild his body, and turn the weakest prince of the demonic cult into something terrifying. This is the beginning of Cheon Yeo-Woon's rise in Nano Machine. Deep inside the southern lands of Jianghu stood the mysterious 10,000 Mountains. Hidden within that mountain range was the demonic cult, a force so feared that outsiders did not dare approach it. But far away from the cult's main castle, a young boy was running for his life. His clothes were torn, his body was covered in wounds, and every breath felt heavier than the last. This boy was Cheon Yeo-Woon, one of the sons of the demonic cult's lord. But unlike the other princes, Yeo-Woon was not respected. His mother was a concubine. He had no powerful clan behind him. And to the other heirs, he was nothing more than a stain on the lord's bloodline. Suddenly, 5 masked assassins appeared in front of him. They had already blocked his escape. To them, killing Yeo-Woon was not a mission. It was cleanup. Yeo-Woon tried to reason with them. He had already given up on joining the academy. He had no martial arts. He had no followers. He was not a threat to anyone, but the assassins did not care, because in the demonic cult, royal blood alone was enough reason to die. Then one of them insulted his mother, and even though Yeo-Woon was weak, exhausted and surrounded, his expression changed. He could accept being looked down on. He could accept being hunted, but he would not accept them mocking the woman who raised him. Just as the assassins moved in to finish him, lightning suddenly crashed down from the sky. In an instant, the masked men were destroyed, and standing before Yeo-Woon was a man in strange silver armor. He did not look like a warrior from this era. His clothes glowed with lines of light. His presence felt unnatural. Then the man looked at Yeo-Woon and called him something impossible. Ancestor. Before Yeo-Woon could understand what was happening, the man pulled out 2 glowing injections. One went behind his ear, the other went straight into his chest. Then the man told him to change his fate, and just like that, he disappeared. Yeo-Woon was left alone, injured, confused, and barely conscious. Then, inside his head, a robotic voice began to speak. The Nano Machine had activated. It scanned his body, detected his wounds, and immediately began emergency healing. The pain faded, the bleeding stopped, and the boy who should have died that night survived. But he had not just survived. His entire fate had been rewritten. The next morning, Yeo-Woon opened his eyes. At first, he thought he had dreamed everything. The assassins, the lightning, the strange man from the future. But when he checked his stomach, the wound was gone. No blood, no scar, no pain. Then he noticed something disgusting. His whole body was covered in dark, sticky liquid. It smelled terrible, like something rotten had been forced out from inside him. Before he could understand what was happening, the voice returned. It was not coming from outside the room. It was inside his head. Yeo-Woon panicked. In the demonic cult, only the Lord was believed to communicate with the divine being they worshipped, the demonic god. So when the voice said Nano Machine, Yeo-Woon misunderstood. To him, it sounded like the name of the god itself. But the voice calmly explained. It was not a god. It was not a martial art. It was a 7th-generation nanomachine created by Sky Corporation to support his body and brain. Of course, none of that made sense to Yeo-Woon. He came from a world of swords, internal energy, clans, and martial arts. The idea of invisible machines living inside his body was beyond anything he could imagine. Meanwhile, outside his room, Guo Jiang and Dr. Bayek were walking toward him. They were still trying to understand what happened the previous night. The assassins had been brutally killed. Yeo-Woon had been found unconscious, and his fatal wounds had completely disappeared. Nobody knew who saved him. Back inside the room, Nano sent information directly into Yeo-Woon's brain. Images, explanations, and strange future knowledge flooded his mind all at once. It was overwhelming. But after the pain passed, Yeo-Woon finally understood one thing. Something impossible had been placed inside his body, and it would stay with him until the day he died. When Dr. Baek entered, he checked Yeo-Woon's pulse. Then his expression changed. Yeo-Woon's body had been completely cleansed. His toxins were gone. His energy flow had opened. His muscles, joints, and blood had been improved. In other words, his body had become perfect for martial arts training. Yeo-Woon was stunned. The disgusting black liquid was not waste from sickness. It was the impurities that Nano had quickly realized his body. To keep Nano a secret. For the first time even in his life, no doctor in this era had detected it, the other heirs could not to be careless. A hidden advantage. Dr. Baek came from the Poison Clan, one of the 6 powerful clans inside the demonic cult. And if the 6 clans discovered that Yeo-Woon had changed overnight, they would never leave him alone. After the doctor left, Yeo-Woon began questioning Nano. Could it heal him again? Could it repair injuries? Could it help him survive? Nano explained that it could heal internal and external wounds quickly unless the injury was too extreme. Yeo-Woon tested it by cutting his palm with a dagger. The wound healed almost instantly. That one moment made him understand how powerful Nano really was. Later, after taking a bath, Yeo-Woon looked at his body in the mirror. He was shocked. Yesterday he had been thin and weak. Now his body looked stronger, cleaner, and more prepared for training. Nano had reconstructed his muscles, bones, blood, and joints. The words were complicated, but the result was simple. His body had been rebuilt. Then Yeo-Woon gave the machine a shorter name, Nano. After that, he tested another ability. He picked up a basic book about blood flow and internal energy. Nano told him to simply look at each page and flip through the book. Yeo-Woon thought it sounded too easy, but he obeyed. After scanning the book, Nano transferred the knowledge directly into his brain. Suddenly, Yeo-Woon could recall the information perfectly. Even more shocking, Nano corrected mistakes inside the book before transferring the knowledge. That meant Nano could do more than memorize. It could analyze, improve, correct. Yeo-Woon smiled. Other students needed time to study. He only needed to scan. For a boy who had been denied martial arts his whole life, this was the first real sign that he could catch up. But elsewhere, one of the other princes was furious. Cheon Yeo-Woon had sent assassins to kill Yeo-Woon. All 5 had failed. Now Yeo-Woon decided that if Yeo-Woon entered the academy alive, he would deal with him personally. On the day Yeo-Woon was supposed to enter the demonic academy, he watched guard Jang training outside. Jang had protected him for years. He was more than a guard. To Yeo-Woon, he was the closest thing to family. But because of the 6 clans watching them, Jang had never been able to teach him martial arts. Then Nano suddenly asked if Yeo-Woon wanted to scan Jang's movements. Yeo-Woon froze. Nano could scan books. But martial arts movements too? Nano confirmed it. If Yeo-Woon watched carefully, Nano could record the movement, analyze it, and transfer it into his brain. With no time left before the academy, Yeo-Woon made his choice. He scanned Jang's dagger technique. For 30 minutes, he observed every movement, every step, every angle, every shift in balance. Then Nano transferred the technique into his mind. Suddenly, Yeo-Woon could see the movement clearly, like a memory that belonged to him. He closed the window and tried copying the stance. His body moved almost exactly like Jang's. The problem was, his body had never trained for it. His brain understood the movement, but his muscles could not handle it. The pain hit him instantly. Nano explained that his muscles needed to be reshaped to match the technique. Yeo-Woon agreed to the process, but he made one terrible mistake. He wanted to experience it without anesthesia. At first it felt strange. Then the pain exploded through his entire body, his muscles twisted, his body locked up. He could not even scream properly. Nano finally injected anesthesia and Yeo-Woon passed out. When Guo Jiang rushed into the room, he found Yeo-Woon unconscious. Then he noticed footprints on the floor. They were not ordinary footprints. They were the exact steps of his dagger technique. Jiang was stunned. He had trained for 20 years to master those movements, and somehow Yeo-Woon
2 hours
had
later,
copied them
Yeo-Woon
just by
woke up.
watching. The muscle transfer
For the first
was complete.
time,
Jiang looked at the
his
weak
body
prints
still
and
remembered
saw
the
something
pain,
else. But when he tested the dagger
talent,
technique again,
hope,
the result was
a future.
completely different. His movements were sharp, controlled, heavy. For a moment, he was amazed. Then he looked down. His foot had left a deep mark on the wooden floor. That was bad. If Jiang saw it, he would know something was wrong. Yeo-Woon rushed to cover it, but before he could hide anything, Jiang entered with breakfast. The meal was simple, but special. Meat, vegetables, eggs. It was Jiang's way of sending him off before the academy. Yeo-Woon understood immediately. This might be the last peaceful meal he would have for a long time. Then Yang noticed the footprint. He pushed the table aside and confirmed it. It was his dagger technique. Yeo-Woon felt ashamed. Even if Nano had done it, he had still copied Jiang's skill without permission. But instead of getting angry, Jiang knelt before him. Then he said Yeo-Woon had done well. If not for his oath, Jiang would have taught him long ago. Then he gave Yeo-Woon a handwritten paper. It contained the energy flow method for the dagger technique. Yeo-Woon could not hold back his tears. Jiang told him he could cry today, but from now on, he had to become stronger. Later that afternoon, Yeo-Woon arrived at the demonic academy. Thousands of students had gathered. The heirs of the 6 clans stood proudly at the front, wearing black tags with red numbers. They were powerful, confident, and backed by families that had trained them since childhood. Yeo-Woon was also an heir candidate, but his tag had mysteriously gone missing, forcing him to stand at the very back. It was clearly sabotage, but Yeo-Woon stayed calm. He already knew the truth. The academy was not a school. It was a battlefield. As the students waited, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The lord of the demonic cult arrived, Cheon Yeo-Woon, one of the strongest figures in Murim. His presence alone was enough to silence the entire training ground. Beside him were his guardians, warriors so powerful that even the heirs of the 6 clans had to lower their heads. For Yeo-Woon, this was the first time seeing his father in 15 years. But the lord's gaze was cold. There was no warmth, no concern, no recognition. Yeo-Woon felt nothing. His father had not come when his mother died, so he had already stopped expecting anything from him. After a short speech, the lord left. Then the real explanation began. The demonic academy would last 4 years. There would be 6 stages. Pass a stage and you rise. Fail and you're expelled. Each stage came with rewards. Medicine that increased internal energy, access to martial arts manuals, and positions of authority over other students. For Yeo-Woon, the library was the most important. With Nano, books were not just books. They were power waiting to be scanned. But then came the first problem. The first test would begin immediately. No training, no preparation, no second chance, and the test required internal energy. Yeo-Woon had none. At that moment, he understood the first test was simple. This was why the
Survived
6
the sound
clans had
energy
stopped
wave
him
for
from
1
learning
minute.
martial arts.
The proctor was
They did not need to kill
Elder
him outside the leader of the sound clan. They only needed him to fail. She sat with her instrument, calm and elegant. But the moment she began to play, students started collapsing. The sound was not just music. It attacked the body directly. It shook the ears, struck the heart, damaged the organs. Students fell one after another, some foaming at the mouth, others clutching their chests in pain. To survive, a student needed internal energy. Yeo-Woon had none. At least, that was what everyone believed. But the moment the sound wave threatened his body, Nano activated emergency defense mode. It blocked the dangerous sound waves from reaching him. Yeo-Woon could no longer hear the music. He could only hear Nano's voice inside his mind. Around him, students were dropping like flies, but Yeo-Woon stood completely still, unharmed, calm, silent. Elder Hong noticed immediately. So did the heirs of the 6 clans. The boy who was supposed to have no internal energy was still standing, and that made them furious. Yeo-Woon quickly understood the danger. If he passed the test without taking damage, everyone would assume he secretly had internal energy. That would mean he had broken his oath. And if the 6 clans became suspicious, they would attack him before he could grow. So Yeo-Woon made a reckless decision. He asked Nano to injure him internally at the right moment. Nano warned him that damaging his own organs was not recommended. But Yeo-Woon knew he needed proof. He needed everyone to believe he survived through willpower, not hidden power. Elder Hong, frustrated by his resistance, increased the intensity of her sound wave. Even the stronger students began to suffer. Some of the 6 heirs turned pale. The left guardian finally ordered her to stop. And the moment the music ended, Yeo-Woon vomited blood. Not a little. A terrifying amount. He collapsed to his knees, surrounded by blood. Everyone froze. No one could call that acting. The left guardian rushed over and checked his condition. Then he realized something unbelievable. Yeo-Woon truly had no internal energy. He had endured the test with nothing but willpower. At least, that was what everyone believed. Yeo-Woon had successfully protected his secret. But the pain was real, and as he was carried away to the infirmary, he finally told Nano to heal him. Yeo-Woon was brought to the academy's infirmary, covered in blood. The doctor there was shocked. Internal injuries should not create that much blood. Something about Yeo-Woon's condition felt strange. But before he could examine him properly, someone barged into the room. It was the right guardian, the Crazy Blade, a drunken-looking man with a terrifying reputation. He was one of the strongest warriors in the entire demonic cult, and he had come personally to see Yeo-Woon. Yeo-Woon tried to pretend he was unconscious, but the Crazy Blade saw through him immediately. Just by listening to his breathing, he knew Yeo-Woon was awake. Yeo-Woon panicked. He thought the Guardian had discovered his trick. But instead, the Crazy Blade laughed. He thought Yeo-Woon had endured the sound wave through pure grit. To him, this weak prince had shown something rare. Not talent, not bloodline, guts. And then, without warning, he made an offer that shocked everyone in the room. He wanted Yeo-Woon to become his student. Yeo-Woon could not believe it. The Right Guardian was one of the most powerful people in the cult. Having him as a teacher would change everything. But Yeo-Woon had been betrayed too many times to accept easily. Was this a trap? Was this another scheme? The Crazy Blade noticed his hesitation and placed an old piece of paper on the bed. Then he told Yeo-Woon it contained what he needed most to survive. The Crazy Blade explained the truth. Yeo-Woon was already behind everyone else. The other students had internal energy. They had clan training. They had martial arts foundations. Yeo-Woon had none of that. Even worse, because he had no internal energy, he could not heal himself naturally like the others. That was why the Left Guardian had sent him to the infirmary. In their eyes, Yeo-Woon was still weak. But Yeo-Woon remembered something important. Passing the first test meant he would receive a medicine ball and access to the academy library. The library was what he wanted most, but the Crazy Blade revealed the catch. Students could not enter whenever they wanted. They only had one chance after passing each test. On the first floor, they only had 2 hours. They could not copy anything down. Most students would waste their time searching for the right book. But for Yeo-Woon, this was not a weakness. It was perfect. Because with Nano, he could scan books at terrifying speed. 2 hours was more than enough. Then the Crazy Blade offered to teach him the breathing method for internal energy. Yeo-Woon knew how valuable that was. He also knew something else. In the academy, he was surrounded by enemies. He needed allies. And now, one of the strongest warriors in the demonic cult wanted to stand on his side. So Yeo-Woon accepted. He bowed and became the Crazy Blade's apprentice. For the first time since entering the academy, Yeo-Woon was not completely alone. He had Nano. He had Guo Jiang's dagger method. And now, he had the Right Guardian. Outside, the results of the first test were announced. Out of the thousands who entered, only 415 passed. The rest were expelled, beaten down, and sent away. The academy had only just begun, but its cruelty was already clear. This was not a place for the weak. But Cheon Yeo-Woon was no longer just weak. He had survived the first trap, and with Nano hidden inside his body, the real climb was about to begin.